It was a peaceful weekend afternoon in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Austin, Texas. Rows of neatly kept houses lined the street, each boasting carefully maintained lawns and gardens. At house number 27, the Parker family was busily preparing for their cherished weekend BBQ, a simple tradition they deeply enjoyed. James Parker, a friendly, approachable 38-year-old engineer, stood by the charcoal grill in their backyard, flipping steaks and sausages with practiced ease. The savory scent of cooking meat filled the air, punctuated by the delightful sizzle from the grill. Beside him, his wife, Sophia Parker, a gentle and warm 35-year-old elementary school teacher, was slicing fresh vegetables for a salad, her face lit by a constant, comforting smile. Their 10-year-old daughter, Emma, giggled as she played fetch with their small dog, Buddy, in the sunlit yard. Soft music played from a Bluetooth speaker on the patio table, adding to the relaxed, joyful atmosphere. It was a perfect afternoon, a time for family bonding and making cherished memories. "Dad, is the meat ready yet?" Emma asked excitedly, running up to the grill, her wide eyes full of anticipation. "Almost, sweetheart. Just another 10 minutes," James replied, affectionately tousling her hair. Emma beamed and ran back to resume her game with Buddy. Watching this scene unfold, Sophia felt a deep sense of peace. Moments like these, away from the hustle and bustle of everyday life, were the ones she treasured the most. Unbeknownst to the Parker family, from the house next door, number 29, someone was watching them with evident displeasure. Frank Thompson, a 62-year-old retired military man living alone, stood at his living room window, frowning. Frank cherished absolute peace and quiet, and the Parker family's cheerful noise and smoky BBQ aroma irritated him immensely. Frank glanced at his watch. It was only 4 p.m., but he felt he'd already endured enough. The laughter, the chatter, and especially the smoke drifting into his yard were all nuisances he couldn't stand. He had lived in the neighborhood for over 20 years, always preferring solitude over neighborhood gatherings and activities. "This is unbearable," Frank muttered to himself. He moved toward his telephone table, determined to call the local police. He didn't want direct confrontation, but neither did he want to tolerate any more disruptions. Frank picked up the phone, dialing the number for the local police station. As the phone rang, he cast another cold glance toward the Parker family's backyard. It wasn't the first time he'd called the police over similar issues, but this time he intended to ensure something was done. Meanwhile, the Parker family remained blissfully unaware that their pleasant afternoon was about to be disrupted by an unexpected phone call. The phone at the local police station rang, and Officer Rick Harris answered calmly, his voice steady and reassuring. "Austin Police Department, Officer Harris speaking. How can I assist you?" "Yes, this is Frank Thompson at 29 Maple Street," Frank began tersely. "My neighbors are having another one of their loud BBQs. It's noisy, there's smoke everywhere, and I want it stopped." Rick sighed inwardly, recognizing Frank's familiar complaint. This wasn't the first call of this nature, and Rick had already checked previous reports, finding nothing out of the ordinary. "Mr. Thompson," Rick began politely, "I understand your frustration, but unless there's a serious disturbance or violation, there's very little we can do. Have you tried speaking directly with your neighbors?" "I shouldn't have to," Frank retorted, irritation clear in his voice. "Isn't it your job to handle nuisances like this?" "Yes, sir," Rick responded patiently, "but typically we encourage neighbors to resolve minor disputes directly. Nevertheless, I'll come by and check things out, just to ensure everything is all right." Frank hung up without another word, feeling somewhat vindicated. At least the police would come and perhaps disrupt the Parker family's gathering enough to make them think twice about future BBQs. Meanwhile, back at the Parkers' backyard, James and Sophia were putting the finishing touches on their meal. Emma had tired from her game and sat at the patio table, sipping lemonade. Just as James was taking the meat off the grill, he heard the sound of a car pulling up in front of their house. Curious, he glanced toward the driveway and saw the familiar black and white police cruiser. Sophia exchanged a worried glance with him. "Did something happen?" she asked anxiously. "I don't know," James replied, trying to remain calm. "Maybe they're just in the neighborhood." Officer Rick Harris got out of the cruiser and approached the backyard gate. James set down the plate of grilled meat and walked over to greet him. "Afternoon, officer. Is everything all right?" James asked, offering a friendly smile. "Good afternoon, Mr. Parker," Rick replied politely. "We've received a noise complaint from one of your neighbors. Just doing a routine check to make sure everything's fine." James sighed, glancing toward Frank's house. "I think I know who made that call. We're just having a simple BBQ. No loud music or excessive noise, officer." Rick nodded, already sensing that this was a minor issue. "I understand. Mind if I just take a quick look around?" "Of course, go ahead," James replied, gesturing towards their peaceful gathering. Rick scanned the backyard, noting the quiet atmosphere and the modest setup. It was clear to him that this was a family enjoying a peaceful afternoon. "Everything looks fine to me," Rick said reassuringly. "Sorry for the inconvenience. Just try to keep things calm, all right?" "Absolutely, officer," James said gratefully. "Thanks for understanding." As Rick walked back to his cruiser, Sophia joined James, her expression mixed with relief and concern. "I wish he would just talk to us," she said softly, glancing toward Frank's house. "I know," James replied, wrapping an arm around her. "Maybe one day he will." A week passed peacefully, and the Parkers decided to have another weekend BBQ. They were mindful of Frank's previous complaints, making extra effort to keep the noise and smoke to a minimum. James carefully placed the burgers and hot dogs on the grill, while Sophia set the patio table with paper plates and cups. "Do you think Mr. Thompson will complain again, Daddy?" Emma asked anxiously, looking up at her father. James tried to reassure her with a smile. "We're being extra careful today, sweetheart. I'm sure it'll be fine." Sophia glanced toward Frank's house, concern visible on her face. "I just hope he understands we're not trying to bother him." "Me too," James replied quietly, flipping the burgers gently. "Maybe we can find a way to talk it out with him." Emma resumed playing quietly with Buddy, occasionally casting worried glances toward Frank's house. The family was cautious, keeping their voices low, the music turned off completely to avoid provoking any complaints. Yet, as James finished preparing the food and started serving it onto the plates, the familiar sound of a car pulling up outside caught their attention. Emma's face fell when she saw the black and white police cruiser parked in front of their house once again. Officer Rick Harris stepped out of the cruiser, an apologetic look on his face. James walked over to greet him, trying to mask his frustration. "Another complaint, officer?" James asked, trying to keep his voice calm. "I'm afraid so," Rick said, sounding genuinely sorry. "Frank Thompson called again, claiming excessive noise and smoke." Sophia approached them, clearly distressed. "Officer, we've done everything we can to keep things quiet. We didn't even play music today." Rick nodded understandingly. "I know you've been careful. I'll talk to Mr. Thompson again, but maybe it would help if you tried speaking with him directly." James sighed deeply, glancing toward Frank's house. "You're probably right, officer. I think it's time we tried to clear this up ourselves." Rick gave a sympathetic nod. "Good luck. I'll go talk to him too." As Officer Rick returned to his cruiser, James and Sophia exchanged worried looks. They knew confronting Frank directly wouldn't be easy, but it seemed necessary now. After a moment's hesitation, James turned to Sophia. "I guess I'll go over there now and see if we can resolve this once and for all." Sophia squeezed his hand gently. "Just stay calm, okay?" James nodded, took a deep breath, and started walking toward Frank's house, determined yet uncertain about how this confrontation would unfold. James approached Frank's front door, his heart pounding with nervous anticipation. He paused briefly before knocking, taking a deep breath to steady his nerves. Finally, he raised his hand and knocked firmly on the door. A few moments later, Frank opened the door slightly, peering out suspiciously. "What do you want?" he asked sharply. "Mr. Thompson," James began respectfully, trying to maintain a calm demeanor. "I wanted to speak with you about the complaints. We really don't want to disturb you." Frank scowled, opening the door a bit wider. "Well, you have been disturbing me. That smoke and noise are unbearable." "We're really sorry about that," James said earnestly. "We've been trying hard to keep everything down. Maybe if you join us sometime, you'd see it's just a simple family gathering." "Join you?" Frank scoffed, shaking his head dismissively. "I have no interest in your BBQs. Just keep it quiet, and we won't have any problems." I understand, James replied calmly. But maybe we could find a compromise. Perhaps we could arrange specific times so you know when to expect it. Frank hesitated for a moment, his expression softening slightly. I appreciate the effort, but I like my peace and quiet. Keep it down, and we'll be fine. With that, Frank closed the door abruptly, leaving James standing on the doorstep. James sighed deeply, feeling both relieved and disappointed. He had hoped for a more open conversation, but at least it was a start. As he walked back home, Sophia met him halfway. How did it go? She asked anxiously. James shrugged, giving her a small, reassuring smile. Not great, but I think there's still hope. He just wants quiet. Maybe we can manage that. Sophia squeezed his hand again. We'll keep trying. I'm proud of you for going over there. James smiled, feeling a bit more optimistic. Let's go enjoy our BBQ, quietly. The family returned to their backyard, determined to find a way to live peacefully alongside their challenging neighbor. In the weeks following the uneasy conversation with Frank, the Parkers continued to be careful with their weekend BBQs. They kept music off, spoke softly, and minimized smoke. Yet despite their best efforts, the tension in the neighborhood grew more palpable each day. Emma was becoming increasingly withdrawn, hesitant to play freely in the backyard. She often looked anxiously towards Frank's house, clearly unsettled by the ongoing conflict. Sophia noticed her daughter's growing anxiety and felt helpless, wishing there was a simple way to ease the tension. One afternoon, while James was mowing the front lawn, Frank suddenly emerged from his house, storming across his yard towards James. His face was contorted with anger, and James immediately sensed trouble. Mr. Thompson, James greeted cautiously, shutting off the mower. Is everything all right? No, it's not all right, Frank snapped, pointing an accusing finger at James. Your BBQs might be quieter now, but that smoke is still drifting into my house. I can't even keep my windows open. James sighed, trying to remain calm. Mr. Thompson, we've done everything we can to minimize any disturbance. We even bought a smokeless grill last week to reduce the smoke. Well, it's not good enough, Frank retorted angrily. I shouldn't have to smell your food every weekend. Sophia, hearing the raised voices, hurried outside. Emma trailed behind her, clutching Buddy closely. Sophia reached James's side, gently placing her hand on his arm. Mr. Thompson, Sophia pleaded softly, we're really trying hard to make this work for everyone. Please, let's find a solution. Frank glared at Sophia, his voice bitter. A solution? How about you stop these BBQs altogether? That would solve everything. Emma whimpered softly, hiding behind her mother. Seeing his daughter's fear ignited something inside James. He straightened his posture, addressing Frank firmly but respectfully. Mr. Thompson, we're not doing anything unreasonable. This is our home, and having an occasional quiet BBQ in our own yard isn't against any rules. We've tried accommodating your needs, but there has to be some compromise. Frank scoffed, his eyes narrowing. We'll see about that. I'll just keep calling the police every single time. Eventually, they'll see it my way. Without waiting for a response, Frank turned abruptly and marched back to his house. James and Sophia exchanged worried glances, both feeling the mounting stress of the situation. Emma clung tightly to her mother, looking up with tear-filled eyes. Mommy, why is he so mean to us? She asked softly. Sophia knelt down, hugging Emma close. He's just having a hard time, sweetie. Sometimes people get upset and don't know how to talk about it nicely. But we're going to keep trying, okay? James watched his family, his determination hardening. They would find a way to resolve this conflict, even if it seemed increasingly difficult. They deserved peace in their own home, and he was ready to stand up for that. As they walked back inside, James knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over yet, and finding peace would require more patience and understanding than ever before. In the days following the confrontation with Frank, the atmosphere in the Parker household was somber. James and Sophia discussed possible solutions late into the night, their conversations often ending in frustration. Despite their best intentions, they felt powerless against Frank's relentless complaints. Emma became more withdrawn, avoiding the backyard altogether. One evening, as Sophia tucked her into bed, Emma asked quietly, Mommy, do we have to move away? Sophia's heart broke hearing the fear in her daughter's voice. No, sweetheart, she reassured Emma gently. We're not going anywhere. This is our home, and we'll find a way to make things better. James decided to reach out to their neighbors for support. He approached Maria Lopez, a friendly neighbor who had lived in the neighborhood for many years. Maria listened sympathetically as James explained the ongoing issue with Frank. James, you're not the first family he's done this to, Maria revealed with a sigh. Frank has always been difficult, but maybe if enough of us speak up, he'll see he's not being reasonable. Encouraged by Maria's support, James spoke to other neighbors. Many agreed that Frank's complaints were excessive and expressed willingness to help mediate the situation. The neighborhood began discussing how they could collectively approach Frank in a constructive way. Meanwhile, Frank continued his campaign, frequently calling the police over minor issues. Officer Rick Harris, becoming increasingly familiar with the situation, found himself frustrated. Each time he arrived, he saw no real cause for complaint, yet he remained patient, trying to keep peace in the community. One evening, a group of neighbors gathered at the Parkers' home. They sat around the dining table, sharing stories and discussing how to handle the situation. James felt hopeful, seeing the community come together in solidarity. "We just want peace," James said earnestly. "We want Emma to feel safe playing in her own yard again." Maria nodded firmly. "We'll find a way. Frank needs to understand he can't disrupt the entire neighborhood with his complaints." As the evening ended, James and Sophia felt renewed hope. They knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but with the support of their neighbors, they felt stronger and more prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead. James hugged Sophia tightly as they watched their neighbors leave. "We'll get through this," he said confidently. Sophia leaned into him, feeling reassured. "Yes, we will." Despite the growing community support, Frank's behavior only intensified. He started documenting every BBQ the Parkers held, taking photos and detailed notes of the activities in their backyard. Sophia often caught glimpses of Frank lurking behind his window, his camera pointed directly at them, leaving her deeply unsettled. One afternoon, Sophia saw Frank pacing along the fence line, glaring into their yard. Her unease grew, and she decided to share her concerns with James that evening. Sitting together in their living room, she expressed her fears. "James, I'm really worried," Sophia said, her voice trembling slightly. "Frank's always watching us, taking pictures. It's starting to feel invasive." James reached over, gently taking her hand. "I know, Soph. I've noticed it too. I'll talk to Officer Harris again tomorrow. Maybe there's something we can do about it." Sophia nodded, though her anxiety remained. "I just want Emma to feel safe again. She's still so scared." James hugged her reassuringly. "We'll figure something out. I promise." The next morning, James called Officer Harris, explaining the situation. Rick listened carefully, clearly sympathetic. "James, documenting your family's private activities without your consent crosses a line," Rick stated firmly. "I'll have a word with Frank. This behavior has to stop." "Thanks, officer," James replied, relieved by Rick's support. "We really appreciate it." That afternoon, Officer Harris visited Frank's home, hoping to defuse the escalating situation. Frank opened the door, visibly annoyed. "What now, officer?" Frank snapped impatiently. "Mr. Thompson, we've received complaints about your behavior," Rick began calmly. "Taking pictures and watching the Parker family is making them feel unsafe. You need to stop." Frank scowled defensively. "I'm just gathering evidence. They're disturbing my peace." "They've made considerable efforts to accommodate your concerns," Rick countered. "Your actions are now infringing on their privacy. Please respect their boundaries." Frank hesitated, clearly unsettled by Rick's warning. "Fine," he muttered. "I'll back off." Rick nodded, hoping Frank would keep his word. As he left, he glanced back at Frank's house, wondering if peace would ever truly return to the neighborhood. Despite Officer Harris's warning, Frank's resentment continued to fester. He no longer took obvious pictures, but his constant presence behind his curtains made the Parkers feel watched at all times. The tension in their home grew, affecting everyone, especially Emma. One evening, as Sophia prepared dinner, she noticed Emma sitting by the window, staring nervously toward Frank's house. Sophia approached her gently. "Emma, honey, are you okay?" she asked softly. Emma looked up, tears filling her eyes. "I'm scared, Mommy. Mr. Thompson keeps watching us. Sophia hugged her daughter tightly, her heart aching. I know, sweetie, but we're doing everything we can to make it better. Daddy is working on it. Meanwhile, James continued talking with neighbors, seeking their advice and support. Maria and several others offered to write statements supporting the Parkers if needed, showing solidarity against Frank's unreasonable behavior. One afternoon, Maria visited Sophia, offering words of comfort. Sophia, don't lose hope, Maria encouraged. We're all behind you. Frank can't intimidate an entire neighborhood. Sophia smiled gratefully, feeling stronger from Maria's support. Thank you, Maria. That means a lot to us. The following weekend, James and Sophia cautiously organized another BBQ, determined not to let fear control their lives. They invited neighbors to join, turning it into a small community gathering. The atmosphere was cheerful, though everyone remained aware of Frank's watchful presence. Throughout the afternoon, laughter and gentle conversation filled the backyard, deliberately kept low but cheerful. Emma played with neighborhood kids, her laughter returning, making Sophia's heart swell with relief. As the evening ended, neighbors expressed their support, assuring the Parkers they would stand with them. James and Sophia watched everyone leave, feeling grateful and hopeful. This was good, James said quietly, holding Sophia's hand. It shows we're not alone. Sophia leaned into him, nodding. You're right. We're stronger together. Though uncertainty lingered, the Parkers felt emboldened by their neighbors' backing, ready to face whatever challenges Frank might bring next. After the neighborhood BBQ, it became clear that many neighbors were growing weary of Frank's constant complaints and interference. The Parkers felt more supported, yet they knew Frank's behavior wouldn't change overnight. To address the issue more effectively, Maria suggested organizing a community meeting to find a peaceful resolution. James agreed and offered their home as the venue for the meeting. On a bright Saturday afternoon, several neighbors gathered in the Parkers' living room, sharing their experiences and concerns. The atmosphere was serious but hopeful, as everyone genuinely sought a constructive solution. Maria began the discussion. We all understand that Frank values his peace and quiet, but his constant complaints and watching the Parkers are affecting us all. We need to address this respectfully but firmly. I agree, another neighbor, Bill Jenkins, added. The Parkers have done everything possible to keep things quiet. Frank needs to understand we all have a right to enjoy our homes. James listened intently, encouraged by the community's willingness to step forward. Maybe if we approach Frank together, as a group, he'll see it's not just our family who feels this way. Sophia nodded in agreement. If we speak respectfully and calmly, perhaps Frank will understand we're not against him. We just want harmony. The neighbors agreed on this approach, deciding to visit Frank together later that afternoon. They felt united and hopeful, ready to find a resolution that would bring peace back to their neighborhood. Later that afternoon, a small group of neighbors, including Maria, Bill, James, and Sophia, gathered in front of Frank's house. James took a deep breath and knocked firmly on the door. Frank opened it cautiously, clearly surprised to see a group on his doorstep. What's going on here? Frank demanded, instantly defensive. Maria stepped forward gently. Frank, we're here because we're all concerned. We understand your need for peace, but we need you to understand that your actions are causing distress to many of us, not just the Parkers. Frank crossed his arms, looking skeptical. I just want some quiet in my own home. Is that too much to ask? No, Bill spoke up, but constantly calling the police and watching your neighbors isn't the answer. It's making everyone uncomfortable. We need to find a compromise. Sophia added softly, we really have tried hard to keep things quiet. We're willing to find solutions, but we need mutual respect. Frank hesitated, looking from one neighbor to another. For the first time, he seemed uncertain. I didn't realize everyone felt this way, he muttered, his tone slightly softer. James took the opportunity to speak sincerely. We're all neighbors, Frank. We want peace just as much as you do. Let's work together on this. Frank sighed, his shoulders slumping slightly. Maybe I have been too harsh, he admitted grudgingly. I'll try to be more understanding. Relief washed over the group. Maria smiled warmly. That's all we ask, Frank. Thank you. As they walked away from Frank's home, the neighbors felt hopeful. It was a small victory, but an important step toward restoring harmony in their community. Just when things seemed to be moving in a positive direction, an unexpected development shattered the newfound peace. A week after the community's visit to Frank, James received a letter in the mail. His heart sank as he read it, a formal notification that Frank had filed a lawsuit against them for disturbing his peace. Sophia saw James's expression change and rushed to his side. "James, what's wrong?" she asked anxiously. James handed her the letter, his voice strained. "Frank is suing us. He claims we've repeatedly disturbed his peace and created a nuisance." Sophia's face paled as she read the document. "But we've been so careful. I thought things were getting better." James sighed deeply, feeling a mixture of frustration and betrayal. "I guess Frank wasn't sincere after all. We'll have to prepare for court." They sat together, the weight of the situation settling over them. Emma noticed their worry and approached timidly. "Mommy, Daddy, is everything okay?" Sophia pulled Emma close, trying to shield her from the harsh realities they now faced. "We'll be all right, honey. We just have some grown-up things to take care of." That evening, James reached out to Maria and a few other neighbors, informing them of the lawsuit. Their neighbors were equally shocked and outraged. Maria quickly offered her support. "James, we'll do whatever we can to help. You're not alone in this." James felt grateful for the support, but couldn't shake the worry about the upcoming legal battle. It wasn't just about the inconvenience. It was the stress on their family, especially Emma. As they prepared to face this unexpected challenge, James knew they had to stand firm, determined to protect their family and their home. In the following days, James and Sophia met with an attorney, carefully discussing their case and reviewing their options. The lawyer, Mrs. Linda Grant, was reassuring. "From what you've described, it seems you've done everything reasonably possible to accommodate Mr. Thompson," Linda explained. "Gather as much evidence and testimony from your neighbors as you can. Their support will be crucial." James and Sophia took her advice seriously, reaching out to neighbors for written statements about the situation. Maria took the initiative to organize a meeting at her house, where neighbors could provide formal statements of support for the Parkers. The neighborhood rallied behind them, expressing shock and frustration at Frank's actions. Many willingly gave statements, detailing how the Parkers had always been considerate and how Frank's complaints were excessive. As the date of the court hearing approached, tension mounted in the Parker household. Emma sensed the anxiety in her parents and became quieter, clinging to her mother more than usual. One night, after putting Emma to bed, Sophia sat with James in their living room, reviewing the collected evidence. "Do you think this will be enough?" Sophia asked softly. James wrapped an arm around her, offering comfort. "I think so. We have a strong case and strong community support. Frank has pushed this too far." Sophia nodded, trying to remain hopeful. "I just hope this ends soon. Emma deserves to feel safe again." "She will," James assured her firmly. "We're going to fight this, and we're going to win." Determined and united, James and Sophia faced the approaching court date with resolve. They knew the battle ahead would be challenging, but with their neighbors' backing and their strong belief in justice, they felt ready to stand their ground. As the court date drew closer, James and Sophia immersed themselves in preparation. They gathered all necessary documents, including the letters from neighbors expressing support and confirming the Parkers' attempts to minimize disturbance. Each piece of evidence was carefully organized, providing a comprehensive view of their situation. Emma remained anxious, sensing the gravity of the situation. She often asked her parents if things would be okay, and they reassured her each time, though their own worries lingered. One afternoon, Linda Grant, their attorney, visited their home to finalize details. She reviewed all the evidence, nodding in approval. "This is strong material," she affirmed. "Your neighbors' statements will be especially impactful." Sophia looked relieved but still concerned. "Will Emma have to testify?" she asked cautiously. Linda hesitated slightly before answering. "It's possible. Her perspective as an affected child could be powerful, but we'll see how things unfold. Hopefully it won't be necessary." Sophia and James exchanged worried glances, clearly uncomfortable with the idea. Yet they understood the importance of every angle of their case. "We'll prepare her, just in case," James said, his voice steady but heavy. Linda nodded sympathetically. Remember, our goal is to prove you've done everything reasonably possible to maintain peace. The court needs to see Frank's complaints as unreasonable and excessive. After Linda left, James and Sophia sat quietly, the weight of the impending trial heavy upon them. James reached for Sophia's hand, squeezing it gently. "We'll get through this," he assured her softly. Sophia leaned into him, finding strength in his presence. "I know. I just want it over." In the days before the trial, the Parkers practiced their statements, ensuring they could convey their experience calmly and clearly. Maria and several other neighbors visited frequently, offering encouragement and discussing their statements for court. Emma, sensing the serious nature of events, became increasingly withdrawn. Sophia gently explained the situation to her, keeping it simple yet truthful. "Emma, we have to talk to some people about the problems with Mr. Thompson. They just want to hear our side of the story." "Will I have to talk too, Mommy?" Emma asked nervously. Sophia hugged her tightly. "You might, sweetheart, but only if you feel okay about it. We just need to tell them the truth, that's all." Emma nodded bravely, though her eyes showed fear. James knelt beside her, speaking reassuringly. "We're so proud of you, Emma. You're very brave, and we're going to be right there with you." The night before the trial, neighbors gathered briefly at the Parkers' home, sharing final words of encouragement. The atmosphere was supportive and determined. Maria addressed everyone firmly. "We stand together. Tomorrow, justice will prevail." As everyone left, James and Sophia prepared Emma for bed, offering comfort and reassurance. After Emma fell asleep, they sat quietly in the living room, their thoughts focused on the next day. James spoke quietly but firmly. "Tomorrow we stand up for ourselves and for Emma. We've done everything we could, and now it's time to show that." Sophia nodded resolutely. "We'll get through this. We have each other and our neighbors' support." Together they faced the approaching trial with determination, ready to confront the challenge head-on, hopeful that justice and understanding would prevail. The morning of the trial dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the tense atmosphere inside the courthouse. James, Sophia, and Emma arrived early, accompanied by their attorney, Linda Grant. They were quickly joined by their supportive neighbors, including Maria, who offered comforting smiles and encouraging words. As they waited outside the courtroom, James took Sophia's hand, squeezing it gently. "Remember, we just need to tell the truth. We've done nothing wrong." Sophia nodded, though her anxiety was evident. "I know. It's just hard being here." Emma clung to her mother, her eyes wide and uncertain. Sophia knelt down, speaking gently to her. "You're very brave, Emma. Everything will be okay." Just then, Frank arrived with his attorney. He glanced at the Parkers briefly, his expression unreadable, before moving into the courtroom. James took a deep breath, steadying himself. Soon after, they were all called inside. The courtroom was formal and intimidating. Judge Ellen Monroe presided, and as everyone took their seats, the reality of the situation felt even more overwhelming. Linda provided James and Sophia with a reassuring nod, silently conveying her confidence in their case. Frank's attorney spoke first, outlining Frank's complaints about noise, smoke, and disturbance. He portrayed Frank as an elderly man, simply seeking peace in his home, painting the Parkers as inconsiderate neighbors. James listened carefully, struggling to remain composed as their actions were misrepresented. Sophia reached for his hand under the table, offering silent support. Finally, it was Linda's turn to speak. She addressed the court confidently. "Your Honor, the Parkers have done everything reasonably possible to accommodate Mr. Thompson's complaints. They've minimized noise, purchased a smokeless grill, and even reduced the frequency of their family gatherings. We have letters from numerous neighbors supporting this claim." Linda presented the documents to the judge, who reviewed them carefully. As the judge examined the evidence, Linda continued, "We contend that Mr. Thompson's complaints are excessive and unfounded, and they have significantly impacted the Parkers' quality of life, especially their young daughter, Emma." Judge Monroe glanced briefly at Emma, her expression softening slightly. "Noted," she said, turning her attention back to Linda. "Please proceed." Linda called several neighbors as witnesses, including Maria. Each testified to the Parkers' considerate behavior and Frank's unreasonable complaints. Maria spoke eloquently about the impact Frank's actions had on the entire neighborhood. Your Honor, Maria stated firmly, the Parkers have always been respectful and mindful. Frank's constant surveillance and complaints have created an atmosphere of tension and discomfort for everyone, especially their daughter. Frank's attorney cross-examined the witnesses, attempting to discredit their testimonies, but each neighbor stood firm in their statements, offering clear and consistent support for the Parkers. After the neighbors finished testifying, Linda approached James and Sophia quietly. We need Emma to testify, she whispered gently. Her perspective is crucial. Sophia hesitated, looking at Emma worriedly. James nodded slowly. If you think it will help, we'll do it. Linda smiled reassuringly. I'll keep it brief and gentle. Emma was called forward, and Sophia walked her to the stand, sitting nearby for support. Linda spoke softly, addressing Emma kindly. Emma, can you tell us how Mr. Thompson's complaints have made you feel? Emma glanced nervously at her mother, who gave her an encouraging nod. Taking a deep breath, Emma spoke quietly but clearly. I feel scared to play outside. Mr. Thompson is always watching us and it makes me nervous. Linda continued gently. Do you think your family has tried to be quiet and careful? Emma nodded firmly. Yes, we don't play loud music and we try not to make any noise. But Mr. Thompson still seems angry. Emma's heartfelt words clearly moved many in the courtroom. Even Frank appeared uncomfortable, looking away from the young girl. Judge Monroe watched Emma thoughtfully before addressing the courtroom. Thank you, Emma. You've been very brave. As Emma returned to her parents, Sophia hugged her tightly, whispering, You did wonderfully, sweetheart. The judge adjourned the session, stating she would review the testimonies and evidence carefully before making a decision. As everyone filed out of the courtroom, James and Sophia felt cautiously optimistic. The heartfelt support from their community and Emma's sincere testimony had given them renewed hope that justice would prevail. In the days following the first court hearing, the Parkers felt a mix of relief and lingering anxiety. The judge had promised to carefully consider all evidence and testimonies, leaving them hopeful yet uncertain about the outcome. Life attempted to return to normal, though the tension remained palpable. Emma, relieved that her testimony was over, started to play outside more frequently. Yet she remained cautious, often glancing toward Frank's house, still fearful of any new confrontation. Neighbors frequently stopped by to check in and offer continued support. Maria visited regularly, always bringing comforting words and reassurance. One afternoon, she sat with Sophia in their kitchen, sipping tea and discussing the trial. You've all been incredibly brave, Maria praised gently, especially Emma. Her testimony was powerful. Sophia nodded, managing a small smile. We're just glad that part is over. Now it's the waiting that's hard. James joined them, taking a seat beside Sophia. The waiting is stressful, but I believe we presented a strong case. We have to trust the judge will see that. Maria reached out, patting Sophia's hand gently. We're all here for you, no matter what happens. Thank you, Maria, Sophia replied warmly. Your support means the world to us. That evening, after Maria left, James and Sophia spent time reassuring Emma, making sure she felt safe and loved. As they tucked her into bed, Emma hugged them tightly. Mommy, Daddy, do you think everything will be okay now? Emma asked softly. James smiled reassuringly, stroking her hair gently. Yes, sweetheart. We're going to be fine. We have each other and our friends. Emma nodded, visibly comforted. As she drifted off to sleep, James and Sophia sat quietly in her room, watching her peaceful face, drawing strength from each other in their unwavering belief in justice. As the days passed, the Parkers remained anxious, waiting for news from the court. Every phone call made their hearts skip a beat, every mail delivery watched with tense anticipation. Their neighbors remained supportive, frequently checking in and encouraging them. One afternoon, as James worked in the yard, Frank unexpectedly approached the fence between their homes. James stiffened slightly, unsure of Frank's intentions. Frank looked uncomfortable, clearing his throat awkwardly. I didn't expect things to go this far, he began, avoiding James's gaze. James watched him cautiously. Neither did we, Frank. Frank sighed deeply, still not meeting James's eyes. I guess Maybe I overreacted. Seeing your daughter on that stand, it made me think differently. James softened slightly. We never wanted conflict. We've always tried to respect your needs. I know, Frank admitted quietly. I guess I just got caught up in my own frustrations. Your Honor, Maria stated firmly, the Parkers have always been respectful and mindful. Frank's constant surveillance and complaints have created an atmosphere of tension and discomfort for everyone, especially their daughter. Frank's attorney cross-examined the witnesses, attempting to discredit their testimonies, but each neighbor stood firm in their statements, offering clear and consistent support for the Parkers. After the neighbors finished testifying, Linda approached James and Sophia quietly. We need Emma to testify, she whispered gently. Her perspective is crucial. Sophia hesitated, looking at Emma worriedly. James nodded slowly. If you think it will help, we'll do it. Linda smiled reassuringly. I'll keep it brief and gentle. Emma was called forward, and Sophia walked her to the stand, sitting nearby for support. Linda spoke softly, addressing Emma kindly. Emma, can you tell us how Mr. Thompson's complaints have made you feel? Emma glanced nervously at her mother, who gave her an encouraging nod. Taking a deep breath, Emma spoke quietly but clearly. I feel scared to play outside. Mr. Thompson is always watching us, and it makes me nervous. Linda continued gently. Do you think your family has tried to be quiet and careful? Emma nodded firmly. Yes, we don't play loud music, and we try not to make any noise. But Mr. Thompson still seems angry. Emma's heartfelt words clearly moved many in the courtroom. Even Frank appeared uncomfortable, looking away from the young girl. Judge Monroe watched Emma thoughtfully before addressing the courtroom. Thank you, Emma. You've been very brave. As Emma returned to her parents, Sophia hugged her tightly, whispering, You did wonderfully, sweetheart. The judge adjourned the session, stating she would review the testimonies and evidence carefully before making a decision. As everyone filed out of the courtroom, James and Sophia felt cautiously optimistic. The heartfelt support from their community and Emma's sincere testimony had given them renewed hope that justice would prevail. In the days following the first court hearing, the Parkers felt a mix of relief and lingering anxiety. The judge had promised to carefully consider all evidence and testimonies, leaving them hopeful yet uncertain about the outcome. Life attempted to return to normal, though the tension remained palpable. Emma, relieved that her testimony was over, started to play outside more frequently. Yet she remained cautious, often glancing toward Frank's house, still fearful of any new confrontation. Neighbors frequently stopped by to check in and offer continued support. Maria visited regularly, always bringing comforting words and reassurance. One afternoon, she sat with Sophia in their kitchen, sipping tea and discussing the trial. You've all been incredibly brave, Maria praised gently, especially Emma. Her testimony was powerful. Sophia nodded, managing a small smile. We're just glad the part is over. Now it's the waiting that's hard. James joined them, taking a seat beside Sophia. The waiting is stressful, but I believe we presented a strong case. We have to trust the judge will see that. Maria reached out, patting Sophia's hand gently. We're all here for you, no matter what happens. Thank you, Maria, Sophia replied warmly. Your support means the world to us. That evening, after Maria left, James and Sophia spent time reassuring Emma, making sure she felt safe and loved. As they tucked her into bed, Emma hugged them tightly. Mommy, Daddy, do you think everything will be okay now? Emma asked softly. James smiled reassuringly, stroking her hair gently. Yes, sweetheart, we're going to be fine. We have each other and our friends. Emma nodded, visibly comforted. As she drifted off to sleep, James and Sophia sat quietly in her room, watching her peaceful face, drawing strength from each other and their unwavering belief in justice. As the days passed, the Parkers remained anxious, waiting for news from the court. Every phone call made their hearts skip a beat. Every mail delivery watched with tense anticipation. Their neighbors remained supportive, frequently checking in and encouraging them. One afternoon, as James worked in the yard, Frank unexpectedly approached the fence between their homes. James stiffened slightly, unsure of Frank's intentions. Frank looked uncomfortable, clearing his throat awkwardly. I didn't expect things to go this far, he began, avoiding James's gaze. James watched him cautiously. Neither did we, Frank. Frank sighed deeply, still not meeting James's eyes. I guess, maybe I overreacted. Seeing your daughter on that stand, it made me think differently. James softened slightly. We never wanted conflict. We've always tried to respect your needs. I know, Frank admitted quietly. I guess I just got caught up in my own frustrations. Frank looked surprised but nodded gratefully. Together, they moved the planter easily to its desired spot. Thanks, Frank muttered awkwardly. I appreciate it. You're welcome, James replied warmly. If you need help with anything else, just let me know. Frank hesitated, then nodded slowly. I might take you up on that sometime. James smiled, feeling hopeful about their improving relationship. As he returned to his own yard, he noticed Sophia watching from the porch, her expression soft and pleased. She walked over to him, slipping her hand into his. That was nice, Sophia said softly. Maybe things really can change. I think they already have, James replied, squeezing her hand gently. Emma ran up to them, smiling brightly. Is Mr. Thompson nice now? She asked hopefully. James lifted her into his arms, smiling reassuringly. He's trying to be, and that's what matters. That evening, as the Parkers enjoyed dinner together, there was a sense of optimism and unity. They felt a renewed connection not only within their family but also with their community, hopeful for a peaceful future. As weeks passed, the neighborhood gradually healed from the tensions of the past months. James and Sophia continued to reach out to Frank in small but meaningful ways. Frank, in turn, showed signs of softening, gradually becoming more approachable. One evening, Maria proposed a neighborhood gathering, a potluck dinner to celebrate the restored harmony in their community. The Parkers eagerly agreed, excited about the opportunity to reconnect with neighbors in a positive and festive atmosphere. On the evening of the gathering, families from the neighborhood arrived, bringing dishes, laughter, and smiles. James noticed Frank standing hesitantly on his porch, observing the festivities from a distance. Encouraged by Sophia, James approached Frank with a welcoming smile. Frank, why don't you join us? There's plenty of food and everyone would be glad to see you. Frank hesitated, looking uncertain. Are you sure? He asked cautiously. James nodded sincerely. Absolutely. We'd all like you there. After a moment's hesitation, Frank agreed and followed James over to the gathering. Neighbors greeted Frank warmly, offering friendly words and genuine smiles. Frank seemed surprised but appreciative, gradually relaxing into the lively, cheerful atmosphere. As the evening progressed, James and Sophia watched with quiet satisfaction as Frank engaged in conversations with neighbors, even sharing occasional laughs. It felt like a significant step forward, a testament to the power of patience, understanding, and forgiveness. By the end of the night, Frank approached James and Sophia, his expression humble yet content. Thank you for inviting me, he said quietly. It means a lot. We're glad you came, Sophia replied warmly. We're neighbors. That's what neighbors do. Frank nodded, a faint smile on his lips. As he walked back home, James and Sophia exchanged grateful glances, knowing they had truly started building bridges toward a stronger, more united community. Several months passed since the potluck dinner, and the atmosphere in the neighborhood had transformed remarkably. The community felt more unified and peaceful, and Frank had become a more integrated and friendly presence. One bright Saturday morning, James, Sophia, and Emma were preparing for another BBQ, this time openly inviting all their neighbors, including Frank. As they set up tables and chairs, Emma played happily in the yard with Buddy, her laughter carefree and joyous. Frank arrived early, carrying a homemade pie. Sophia greeted him warmly, genuinely touched by the gesture. Thank you, Frank. It looks delicious. Frank smiled shyly. I haven't baked in years. Thought I'd give it a try again. James approached, shaking Frank's hand warmly. We're glad you could come. It's great to see you here. Frank nodded appreciatively. Thank you for inviting me. I've missed gatherings like this. As more neighbors arrived, the backyard filled with cheerful conversation, laughter, and the delightful aroma of food cooking on the grill. Emma ran around with the other children, her previous fears forgotten. James stood by the grill, flipping burgers and hot dogs, feeling content as he watched neighbors mingle and enjoy each other's company. Sophia moved gracefully among their guests, making sure everyone felt welcome and comfortable. Frank sat at a table, chatting easily with Maria and a few other neighbors. His laughter blended naturally with the others, a stark contrast to the guarded, isolated man he had been just months earlier. As the evening progressed, the atmosphere remained festive and harmonious. James paused for a moment, taking in the heartwarming scene before him. He felt immense gratitude for how far they had come, reflecting on the challenges they had overcome to reach this point. Frank approached James, his expression sincere. "James, I wanted to thank you again for everything. Your kindness and patience, it changed me." James smiled warmly. "We all make mistakes, Frank. What matters is how we move forward. We're glad you're part of our community." Frank nodded, visibly touched. "Me too. This neighborhood feels like home again." As the sun began to set, neighbors gradually started to head home, each expressing gratitude for the wonderful gathering. Maria hugged Sophia tightly. "This was perfect. You both have brought us all together." Sophia smiled, her heart full. "We couldn't have done it without everyone's support." After the last guest left, James, Sophia, and Emma sat together on their porch, savoring the peaceful evening. Emma yawned sleepily, cuddling into Sophia's side. "This was the best day ever," she murmured happily. James wrapped an arm around his family, feeling deeply content. It really was. As they watched the stars begin to twinkle in the darkening sky, a profound sense of peace and accomplishment settled over them. They had weathered the storm together, emerging stronger and more united. The neighborhood had healed, and new friendships had blossomed. James squeezed Sophia's hand gently, smiling. "Here's to new beginnings." Sophia smiled back warmly. "And lasting friendships." Together under the peaceful night sky, they knew their future was filled with hope, harmony, and endless possibilities.